Okay, good morning. Welcome, thanks for being here. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda. Motion from Tyler.
Second.
Second from Sammy. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Public comment on the agenda item. There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting as well. Any public comment? Thank you for being here. Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes from our regular meeting from December. We're doing that one because there was a question about item 4. Under that first paragraph in parentheses where it says defacing public property or graffiti, we just needed to confirm that that's what.
That was December, but I believe that was what I said instead of litter.
Okay. So we're good with changing it to that. Okay. So
We'll leave it as is.
leave it as is. Okay. Then I would ask for a motion to approve that. Motion from Bruce. You're shaking your head, Lindsay. Is that that's a second from Lindsay?
Lindsay? Okay.
Yeah. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And then moving on to minutes from last month's meeting from January 17. Any questions or?
Sorry, I think it was January 10th. Sorry about that.
Oh, January 10th. Yes, thank you. Looking for a motion? Motion from Tyler. Second, Bruce. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you again. Good morning, Deanna.
Good morning.
Approval of financials from January. Any questions for Carmen or anyone else on the financials? Okay, no questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Okay, motion from Bruce, second from Tyler. Everybody awake? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried again, thank you. Executive Director report, Carmen's taken that today.
Yeah, first and foremost, welcome. As you all know, that Mark Miller has moved on from the Manistee Area Chamber of Commerce. I just would like to take a brief moment to thank him for all of the efforts that he has done for the Manistee Area Chamber and also Downtown Development Authority and the economic development efforts of Manistee County. So with that being said, just filling in for the executive report. So there are a couple of highlights that I would like to include today. I reached out to Jeff McCullough to see if I could get an update on the bridge, just to kind of give you guys, where we're at with the bridge opening. According to the DPW director, Jeff McCullough, he did not have any specific date at this point. They are going to be opening the marine traffic on April 1st. And then vehicle traffic is hoping for sometime in May. They're hoping to get the 2 lanes as open as possible. So I'm assuming that there will be more information to come as the bridge continues to be worked on. In addition to that, I did send out an email last night. We do need to complete a special meeting to have a further discussion on the streetscape and the budget. There is a deadline to have the budget for the DDA to the city by March 8th. So if I'm going to ask all of you guys to fill out the doodle poll so we can have a potential doodle or meeting next week sometime. So that would be wonderful. As far as economic development efforts, there was a report in the packet. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask Stacy. She'll be able to help answer some of those questions while we're in the process of hiring a new economic development director. That is all that I have for today.
Great, thank you, Carmen. Any questions for Carmen? Okay. Moving on to reports from ad hoc committees, facade grant. Back to you, Carmen.
Yes, so as far as the facade grant, where we're at with the process, before Mark's departure, we did finalize the awarded amount, which will then be notified to all of the 5 participating facade recipients. And we did receive $75,000 from the MEDC as far as the first payment goes. It did end up going over to the city, so we're working on processing those payments over to the DDA account. More to come soon.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Ed, for identifying that. Okay, social district and events. Karen's gone today, but that committee consists of Karen, Bill, Lindsay, and Deanna. So any updates? Or?
I think, we went through kind of a draft list of items for, and I think we talked about how we need a policy for these things, which I think is very true. Kyle, you found a different type of heater. If you could send that to me and we'll kind of update that. And I think probably at this point we'll just put it as part of the budget process. We were kind of pushing to see if it was needed for the winter events, but I think we could just do it as part of the budget.
Okay, great, thank you. Moving on to old business, Ed Bradford's here today to introduce an investment policy. Thank you, Ed.
You're welcome. So thanks for indulging me here. By law, local units of governments and their subsidiaries like a DDA are supposed to have an investment policy, and I think the DDA's never really done much investing, so they probably haven't had one, or maybe they kind of work under the city's policy. But you guys have a significant fund balance that's sitting there not earning anything really, and there's an opportunity to invest in a cooperative local government investment pool called Michigan Class. I'm actually on the board of Michigan Class, elected by the peers that invest in the pool. But basically it's a short-term money market type investment, but the current yield on that is 5.5% roughly. And obviously those rates track what the market's doing, so as the economy continues to slow down, if the Fed starts to cut rates, the yield on that fund will decline as well. But there's an opportunity to adopt an investment policy, which I drafted on behalf of the DDA. It's based on the city's policy. That's a required step by statute, but also required to join Michigan Class, and then potentially consider joining Michigan Class. And I gave you information in your packet on the different people that are parts of the pool, and some fact sheets on it, and also the application for that. So my recommendation is that you discuss the investment policy, any changes, and then adopt that. If not at this meeting, you need to do it at a future meeting because it's required, and then potentially consider joining Michigan Class. I can tell you there's about $4 billion in assets under management, and it's a really great program in hundreds of communities across the state. Carmen, can you pull up the list on that of do I have to do it from? Pull up the list of participants just so that people can
What would
see.
you like?
It's the one in the middle on the bottom, the Michigan Class participant list. So you can see, we've got almost every county in the state, and we have cities, villages, townships, authorities, libraries, conservation districts. The Local Community Stabilization Authority, which is a state agency, uses Michigan Class to distribute funds to local government, some of the payments that they have to put out. So there's a lot of members there. I think it's an excellent product and worthy of your consideration. I don't know if anybody has any questions on Michigan Class at all.
Do you know the cost to join off the top of your head?
0.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The other thing to point out, I think, is really critical is you basically have same-day liquidity. So if you wanted to get a wire transfer to withdraw funds and you get your request in by a certain time, they'll wire the money out that day. If not, standardly it's ACH, it's available the next day.
Okay.
So Ed, I've got a question, and you'll have to pardon me, but because I work with an accountant who helps me make these decisions, but why wouldn't we just go to Edward Jones and invest in a money market or something like that?
I can't speak for Edward Jones because I'm not familiar with their products. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a competitive rate with this, and I think Edward Jones would charge you a higher fee than what Michigan Class has negotiated for their fund manager.
Okay.
So I did see the city of Manistee on there, and you mentioned, so maybe you guys are going under the city of Manistee. Would that, for a small DDA of this side, would that not be acceptable?
So I think because you're a separate entity, you would need to have your own account and paperwork. If for some reason, as they do in many communities, the city manages the DDA's affairs, financial affairs, then you could probably invest those funds through the city because we're the financial fiduciary at that point, but that's not how this DDA works, so you need your own.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Ed?
Ed, do you want to show the, I think, the investment policy of a draft in our?
Sure.
We can pull that up.
Let's see, it's going to be this first one. Sure. So this policy is drafted pretty much after the cities, but there's also some best practice examples out there that the cities was based on. So obviously it's got a purpose, and the purpose would be to invest the funds that provide the highest investment return and maximum security commensurate with the risk of the investments. Basically, safety, liquidity, yield, SLI is the acronym. That's what you want in your investments. You want to have prioritize safety and liquidity, and then yield is the third. The scope would be all financial assets held by the DDA unless excluded. So basically, your excess cash that you have on the books. The policy says that the executive director is responsible for the investment of the DDA funds, and they can designate or have a designee to help with that. Obviously, there's a prudence standard. Basically, just provides a protection for the board. It's a standard of care that you have to use when you're investing. The investment objectives, as we mentioned, safety, diversification, liquidity, and then return on investment that's addressed in the policy. There's some talk about policies and internal controls. So, they need to be invested under the procedure. So the DDA would work through a procedure where the executive director, determines what the new cash needs are coming up, and then would invest, appropriately so that you had enough money to, do payroll or to pay your bills or whatever. Again, that's not as big of an issue because you have basically daily or next day liquidity if you need it. So your audit, which is done by the city's auditor, would include a review of those investments as well. And just so Michigan Class is audited every year by a big firm, and we're AAA rated by Standard & Poor's and the major rating agencies. There's a topic or a kind of section here in the policy about ethics and conflict of interest. Section about authorized financial dealer or financial dealers and institutions that you would work with. And then the authorized investments is the key. That basically mirrors the list that's in Public Act that details with public fund investments. There's a whole list of them, and it basically is duplicated in here. And there's a section in here at the end, right here, investment pools organized under the Surplus Funds Investment Pool Act. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, so that is basically what allows you to do it in Michigan Class. Some communities, investment policies don't have these sections at the bottom, and so they need to add those if they wanted to invest in the government pool. If you happen to hire an investment advisor, which is allowed, nobody on the DDA can have an interest in those investments. You're allowed to pool your cash. Your security should be held by a third-party safekeeping. That is automatic with Michigan Class. And then you've got maximum maturity, so you don't want to invest your funds out further than you're going to need it for cash flow. And also you can't invest out, if you were to invest in individual security, you couldn't invest in a bond maturing more than 7 years out. You need to report periodically, quarterly in this case, as part of your packet, kind of quarterly investment report. And then talks about accounting. and that the policy needs to be adopted and reviewed annually. If you were to go with a different investment advisor down the road, they need to get a copy and sign this acknowledgement so that they know what legal investments are. Some communities have gotten themselves in trouble when they're working with a third-party investment advisor that's out of a municipal pool where they get them in securities that aren't allowed by statute. Hopefully that's kind of a thing of the past because there's a lot more awareness of that, but that happened to the city way back in the day, long before I was with them. When the oil and gas one was first getting started, they had hired an investment advisor. He had them in securities that they shouldn't have been. They had to unwind those. There's a glossary attached to the investment policy, and then an attachment, which I didn't put on here, is PA 20 of 1943, which was in your packet as well, which is the actual policy. I don't know if there's any questions on that or if you guys had a chance to review that, but that's a pretty standard investment policy. There's nothing overly risky. It includes the standard investments that are allowed in Public Act 20, and that's by its very nature limiting for this type of organization.
Is this essentially a mirror what the city's using?
It's almost identical. I had to
Okay.
make a few little changes
Okay.
for stuff that wasn't applicable to the DDA.
So no need to have an attorney or CPA look at it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I also had one of the representatives from Michigan class, they review all the investment policies too, just to make sure, and Jeff said it looked fine. so.
Okay, great.
Should there be a line on how much operating expenses need to be held back, or how much should be invested, or what that ratio is?
Well, I think there's a section in here, I think it's hard to, it's difficult to put a hard and fast rule on that, but I think. you
Not like
could-
4 months of operating expenses should be in reserves or whatever?
Yeah, so that would be more of a fund balance policy, Sandy,
Okay.
rather than in your investment policy. But there is a section in here that talks about but basically on the maximum maturities. That's kind of will attempt to match its investments with anticipated cash flow requirements.
Okay.
But what you're talking about is the fund balance policy, which is how much do you want in reserves. And those reserves can be held in investments because you have daily liquidity. But it's more of, I don't want to let, whether that's a combination of cash and investments, or investments go below, whether it's 3 months or 2 months
Okay.
operating.
So you're creating work for me right now, in my other job.
Thank you, Ed. Any questions for Ed?
I think the key is the daily liquidity,
Mhm.
cash, so it's basically like having it in a checking account.
Yeah, it's exactly, I mean, I look at our investments a couple times a month and move money around and try to maximize, because this is the salad days for this type of an investment with the Fed having raised interest rates so quickly, and now they're taking a long time to come back down. And they may stay at an elevated level for a while because inflation's still being sticky. So you really have an opportunity. I mean, you have over $600,000 in assets sitting there. Even if you put just $500,000 in for a year, it'd be $25,000
Mhm.
or more of money that you wouldn't otherwise have.
I guess the way I see it is, as a board, we've been given the responsibility to take care of this money. It's public funds. It seems like a no-brainer to me, but I would also defer to Ed, and I appreciate you.
And if you decide to go down this path, I'm happy to work with Carmen on getting that set up. I can show her the portal and how to do the transfers and all that stuff, so.
Okay, great.
Ed, question for you, is this something that we should look at for the next fiscal year, or is this something that we can set up right away? How does that process, or what does
Well,
that look
if
like?
you adopt your investment policy today and you approve joining the resolution that I put in the packet, Michigan class, it's just a matter of filling out the paperwork and you can start as soon as they set your accounts up. You don't have to wait.
Okay. How would we like to go?
I make a motion to approve the investment policy.
Okay, motion from Bruce,
I'll second.
second from Sammy. Any questions or further discussion?
So I would think that you can adopt the investment policy. If the board wanted to look at other opportunities outside of Michigan Class, they could do that. But
Absolutely.
I think Ed was just trying to, the quickest way, or just his recommendation, which we
Yeah.
appreciate.
Okay. Anything else? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Can we make the motion today? I'm sorry. Can we make the motion today then also to adopt the Michigan class?
We can, is that what you're suggesting?
I would like to make a motion to adopt Michigan class since it seems like a very reputable,
To join Michigan class?
to join Michigan
Okay.
class.
Second.
Motion from Deanna, second from Bruce. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thanks again, Ed.
Yeah. Carmen, I'll get you Jeff Anderson's contact information. It might already have been in that packet. He's one of the reps for class, and he'll walk you through what needs to be filled out on the paperwork, so you can get that in and all that good stuff.
I'll
I'm gonna step
Thank
in
you.
and work on
Yeah,
everything if you don't
ASAP,
mind.
right, that's, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to new business. Tyler has a presentation on gap financing.
You don't want to stay for the presentation? It's going to be thrilling. All right. Well, good morning. You should all have a one-page handout for the proposed gap financing program that at this point is just an outline, concept based on a program that other communities have in place to help with economic development in the Manistee DDA. So there'd be additional steps that would need to take place prior to any of it being formalized. But this slide is just meant to help give you a basic understanding, conceptualize what I'm talking about here. So this should look familiar to everybody. That's the DDA boundaries. So this program would be similar to a DDA or a brownfield in the way that the baseline taxes are frozen at the current levels that they're at, and then any increase in taxable value from investment could then be captured and reimbursed back to a property owner or a developer for improvements to the property. So obviously, any project that would be able to utilize this program would have to increase the taxable value. This is just meant to, help further understand that we're talking about a literal boundary around the property. That property obviously is not in Manistee. I didn't want to put anybody's buildings up there and go into details on them, but that is a building in Owasso from a project that I'm familiar with from a previous position, and just what it ended up looking like. Obviously, they did not use this program. They used MEDC funding, brownfield funding, OPRAs, everything possible to make that happen. But it's a different market, it's a different project, but just to help you visualize. So while these pictures are from a different project in Owasso and a different community, the numbers that I have in the presentation are based on a pro forma, a very rough pro forma I put together on a property in the district with vacant first floor and third floor that would be available, that would be able to utilize a program like this, and how it could help make that type of project a reality based on the market conditions in the area and what kind of lease rates you can get as a property. Pushing the space bar on my laptop. So this slide is getting lost because I'm on two different computers, so I apologize for that. This slide is the numbers I was discussing. So 3-story building, 18,000 some square feet. The first floor has nice commercial space, so that floor doesn't need any renovation, so you have about 12,000 square foot of renovation. Potential to add up to 6 apartments based on the square footage. Total project cost, I just used a normal construction cost per square foot that we're seeing in the area, just based on my past experience here. That's how I came up with the $2.4 million in project cost. So the assumptions I used for the pro forma was $12,000 a month in rent for the residential units, $9 per square foot on the retail lease, a $480,000 MEDC grant, that's what they'd be eligible for, $240,000 cash investment, which is 10% of the total project cost, and that's pretty typical in projects like these. And then $180,000 land contribution, so that's the value of the property. And then you need a $1.5 million bank loan, that's 65% of the renovation cost, which is also very typical. I put this fancy art here showing what you'd basically be doing if you invested into this project without additional incentives. So putting all those assumptions into the pro forma the MEDC uses for projects, you come up with a negative cash flow of over $9,000. So you have a negative return on your investment of 3.8%. And your debt service coverage ratio is 0.73. And MEDC will not consider your project if it's not at a 1.2-ish debt to service coverage ratio. And I don't think anybody in this room would want to invest in a project where you're going to continue losing money after you make your investment, unless it's just a hobby and a passion project for you and you don't mind losing all that money. So what can be done? How can the DDA help to bridge the gap? So an estimated after investment taxable value of $800,000. So your taxes on this property would increase from $15,252 to about $49,480,000 a year. So your incremental value, what you increase the taxes by based on the investment, is about $34,228 each year moving forward. So the amount captured, $684,560,000, that would be over 20 years. Again, this program has not been created, the requirements have not been created, no stipulations around the program have been created, so those are all things that would have to be determined. You could limit this, you could limit this to less if that is the preference of all the stakeholders involved. But for the purposes of this presentation, that's the amount that I came up with. So what that results in is a 9.8% return on your cash, $26,000 in annual cash flow, and a debt service coverage ratio of 1.45. So that project would likely to receive funding and become a reality. And that guy down there, he had a great idea for how to utilize taxes and invest it back into the community.
Tyler, can I ask a question on that previous slide? Just to try to understand, so what the $684,000, that's assumed over 20 years.
Yeah.
Is that essentially, if we adopted a program like this, that's what the DDA would be foregoing? And
Yes.
this DDA would be foregoing over 20 years, in this case, $684,000?
Correct.
Okay.
Kind of goes to your question. So yes, it would be what you'd be hypothetically foregoing. But what if you did not utilize that program and that property remained vacant, what you would be left with is this. You'd have this. The DDA would continue receiving $15,252,000 in annual taxes. You would have zero out-of-pocket costs for the DDA. You'd have zero investment as well. You'd have zero new apartments. You'd have zero new people living in the district, and you would have zero new customers to other downtown businesses. You have that guy sad on the corner in front of the building. Over there, you have a bunch of happy shoppers in front of a nice new, brand new building. And then you'd still be receiving the same $15,250 in annual taxes. The DDA would be paying $0 of what they're free, because it's a reimbursement-based program. So I had out-of-pocket costs, however you want to interpret that, I guess. You'd have $2.4 million of investment. You'd have 6 new apartments based on the average number of people that live in a single-bedroom apartment. You have 9 new people living in the district. So you have 9 new people walking around spending their money and creating more economic development in the community. So I would prefer the one on the right-hand side. So this slide is meant to, sorry, I got lost again. Oh, this slide's just meant to visually help you understand the mechanics of the program. So if there's any concern to financially to the budget or anything like that, there's not, because the property pays their taxes, goes to City Hall, goes to the DDA, then the DDA reimburses the property. So that's all that slide is meant to show. It's not like the DDA has to come up with $34,000 annually and pay that. It's paid by the property, the money's received, then that incremental value is paid back to the developer. So then...
So Tyler, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So essentially, back to your original slide, where it would be an incentive for business owners to update their property because of the increased amount of costs that it would be to bring those up to code or
Exactly.
to,
Mm-hmm.
so it helps them cash flow to incentivize them actually to do the project.
Yes,
Okay.
precisely. So what exactly would we, could the eligible activities be? I would think we'd want to maximize all other available financing tools and incentives first, and then if there are not, if those programs are not able to fill the gap for the project, then that's where I would suggest using this type of program. So, for example, non-brownfield or brownfield eligible expenses. So these are the type of things defined in Act 381, which is the Brownfield Act in Michigan, that are eligible through a brownfield. So infrastructure and site improvements, including parking, demolition, lead, mold, asbestos abatement, site preparation, and brand new as of December or November, I'm not quite sure exactly when the legislature passed, but they made an amendment to the Act 381 and added direct costs related to housing. So what we want the program to cover are items that are not able to be covered by other existing programs. And what this program could help with is funding other Manistee DDA priorities that exist currently in your TIF plan. And I listed some of those out. Those are already listed in your TIF plan, and then I can't remember exactly what meeting it was, but just recently when we were reviewing the TIF plan, and it was stated along the lines of that there's no way you'll be able to accomplish everything on this list in this plan. And while that may end up being true in reality, I don't personally believe in creating a plan and not at least working and trying to achieve what you've stated in that plan. So trying to come up with different opportunities or options to help us achieve what is already currently stated there. And then, as I mentioned before, in regards to the budget, this program would not affect the projected TIF plan financially. So there's no projected increase in new economic development in your TIF plan. I stated that at the meeting when we were reviewing it. So there's zero assumptions that new tax base is being created over the next 20 years in the plan. It's simply inflationary increases of the existing tax base. So if you did this program, it would not affect those projections at all, because there is no projections included for additional taxes. Does that make sense to everybody? Then the last slide I have here is a list of communities that already have this exact same program with the exact same language I'm proposing. And it's not an exhaustive list because I, like everybody else, have a full-time job and can't, do all the research here, but I'm working on getting a list of every community in the state that has this program. But as you can see, Hart is nearby, Village of Lexington, that's a similar sized community. Leslie is by Lansing, not a super big community or anything like that. And then I will say also, Farmington, I found an RFP for redevelopment ready projects that the Michigan Municipal League was a part of, and the MEDC, and both organizations approved their redevelopment ready sites to be put out for RFP for developers. And this exact program was advertised as an incentive for the community. So my overall point is that if I'm a developer looking to do a project, and that project is located in any of these communities, instead of Manistee, this would be possible currently, right now. If you went to any of those communities, you'd have access to this public incentive. Where we're at now, we do not. I guess we need to be able to use all the tools that are made available to us in order to compete with other communities in what they're able to offer for economic development. And if you don't, you're simply making things more difficult than you need to on your community. The most powerful tools for public economic development are, other than grants, are brownfields, land banks, and other tax increment financing. Those are the most powerful tools a local community has control over and can utilize to affect economic development. I did mean to include like a list of next steps. I forgot. But if the board's interested in exploring this further, we need to develop requirements and criteria for projects and for what the DDA's priorities are of what they want to accomplish through that program. And then I think it needs to be strategically done in coordination with the city and other public incentive programs that they currently have, so that we can maximize the returns on all of the different public incentive tools that we have available in the community, and achieve the results in all of our different master plans and development plans that we have. So I think this would be an added tool that we'd be able to use. That's all for the presentation. Any questions?
Tyler, does gap or can gap financing apply to vacant property?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so on the handout, I included the authorities of the board. I actually have it on here too. So DDA Act 197, powers of the board. You are able to make and enter into contracts necessary or incidental to the exercise of its powers and the performance of its duties. That's a pretty clear statement. That's pretty general. One, improve land, construct, reconstruct, rehabilitate, restore, and preserve, equip, improve, maintain, repair, and operate any building, including multiple family dwellings, and any necessary or desirable appurtenances to that property within the downtown district for the use in whole or in part of any public or private person or corporation or a combination of them. So those are just two of your powers and authorities within the DDA board.
Is it common that each project gets approved individually, or is this just a blanket tool?
Well, so all I'm proposing is that we create the program, create the guidelines, create the rules, create the applications, all the, whatever standard processes we need to put in place to make sure that it's managed properly. And then after that, it would, however, the DDA comes and develops like the guidelines on it, it would be a case-by-case basis based on the applications.
Thank you. Any questions for Tyler? Just a thought that I have is, it's been a number of years since the DDA's gone through a strategic planning session, and I've been thinking about scheduling something like that in the next, 6 months or so. I haven't given a lot of thought, but maybe this is something that we could look at during that time as well, kind of dive deeper into it. I'd be interested in the opinion of city finance, Ed, and how this fits in with the rest of the programs, and what, just his opinion of what that looks like as well. That's just my thoughts.
We have some buildings downtown that have in need of some work. I mean, we have the Oprah with the music vault, so that incentive, and they don't realize the benefit till they start doing the work, and it sounds like this would be similar, where it's, basically they fix up the building, and then they see a benefit because they fixed up the building. So.
Well, and this could be layered with an Oprah or anything similar to a brownfield. So again, I would encourage, if we continue dialogue around the program, is that you try to exhaust all existing financing mechanisms first, and this is meant to, get the project over the last hump.
Tyler, why?
Why?
Why is it only a last hump tool? I mean,
Doesn't need to be.
Philosophically,
But, yeah.
right? You say every piece of development from here out that invests in property will give you back, will write check back, and forever.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's the philosophical limit on that? Why wouldn't you do it that way? Why would you make it a program and do it for specific projects? Why do you do it at the end, after you finance in other ways? That may be a bigger question than for right now, but I think that's what
Sure.
that's what we need to think through.
And if there was interest in doing that, you could do that that way. It's just the way it's been implemented before as gap financing, which means, if you have a gap, you've explored your other possibilities, but doesn't need to be that way. So.
When you mentioned 20 years earlier, is
That's
that?
the length of the TIF plan.
Okay, so each project would have to, the due date essentially would have to reflect the amount of years left on the DDA's TIF plan?
I can't answer whether it would have to be or it would be required to. I'm not 100% certain on that. But I think for the sake of, it's the DDA's power and authority to do that you keep it confined to the length of the DDA's approved existence.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say that cities themselves can't contribute public funds to private projects. DDAs have different authorities than the city, but so I don't know if that would become an issue. if
So it has to be
the
done
DDA was
through an
to
existing,
sunset.
it has to be done through an existing DDA?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, what I was trying to get to is as a tool to stimulate development, that would not otherwise happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's one thing. But it's not a tool to permanently change the cash flow and reward investors in perpetuity at the expense of the taxes paid, which are to provide services,
Mhm.
public services. So, you know, how we think through where that boundary is, you know, those are some of the things we have to do. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't put the tool in place, you know, until we, you know, figure out what the boundaries are, because there are some projects that are around right now that we'd all agree, you know, satisfy every criteria. So I don't know, we can step through the steps, creating the opportunity, and then step through the process of creating policy around it.
Can I ask a couple questions too? So for that, the project has to be completed before the agreement. I mean, you set up the agreement, but before they could get the dollars back.
Correct. If there was no public or no private investment done on the property, there's no increase in taxable value, so there's nothing to reimburse the property.
So from the DDA's standpoint, if we're looking at this potential program, probably should really start reviewing it sooner than later, because if we do have projects and they are going to take upwards to 3 to 5 years, and then you're cutting into that TIF plan, then you're only going to be reimbursed by what, potentially 15 years or in that too. And then, Bill, I have a question for you. Did the city ever adopt that matrix, the incentive matrix, like a resolution that our economic development EDC
No,
put forward?
we discussed it, we didn't adopt a formal one, and I think there was some criteria. It was to give, I think we had a study session to kind of give an idea of what kinds of things we were looking for incentives for, but a formal adoption with some hard lines, we did not.
Okay, because I think if, just talking freely, if that program, if the DDA did adopt that program and then we added it to that incentive matrix, that shows developers that your community, your city, and your DDA is open, and here's potential opportunities for assistance with your projects. So just to kind of throw that out there.
And one thing that, like a project cost, a significant project cost that I was thinking of this morning, that we had talked about when I met with you last, elevators. So that's something that's not clearly covered in the brownfield program and things like that, and it's a big cost to a project that makes it inhibitive sometimes to develop them. I mean, look across the street, it has a vacant second floor, but you can probably add 4, maybe squeeze 5 units up there, and if you squeeze 5 units up there, put 4. I think the building code would require you to put an elevator in, and then if the project's not going to work. Every time I've done a pro forma on that building, because it's been relatively the same since I've moved to this community, you'd have to probably add a 3rd story on there, which historically that building did have a 3rd story, so you would be able to do that. But then you're generating enough revenue to be able to, and profit to make the project worthwhile at that point. But yeah, if you're, the project I think would be, or the program would be effective for addressing those projects that are, 3 to 6 unit apartments that you can add, not a significant amount of units to add additional cash flow and profit to the project. And those are the ones that we really need in the community, right? And to fill up your vacant second floors. And on the riverside, 1st floor walkouts could be apartments as well. But to be able to get those properties to a point where they're, activated and drawing more people into our community, I think that's what something like that would have.
If this tool comes into place at the end of the project, upon completion, right?
Yes.
Then can the developer, i.e. Bauer, or use it as leverage up front?
So with brownfield financing, you can get an assignment to a bank, and they finance that up front, and then the bank takes those reimbursements for that period. So it would depend on the lender. But if we also worked with our local lenders and explained the program to them and things like that and got them comfortable with that financing mechanism, I think that would be the most realistic way to go for that.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Is it also a way to incentivize completion of projects too, though? Because if you had an agreement and you made the agreement up front and said, okay, and you walk through the pro forma and kind of the plan going forward, like 3 years to get this project done. And obviously they could ask for an increase in time due to, construction and things like that, but that may be a tool to get some of these
I think
projects
you could
going.
use it as an incentive to get the project moving faster. Like, hey, we can offer you this
Yeah.
added incentive if you're able to get the project moving in a timely manner or something like that. I think that it would be possible. Sure.
Okay. Now what?
I think the approach to, we have the facade program that's gearing up. I think this could be another option offered, and maybe just kind of getting because there are some buildings that definitely need some work, and it's just another thing to offer. I think we have a relationship with them.
I guess I would be, these are just details, but I'd be curious as to what the management of this program looks like from a staff standpoint or executive director standpoint. Be curious what other gap financing policies look like, if there's any examples.
There's going to be contracts involved. You're going to have the assessment, the assessor do a projection about the taxable value increase, and then you're going to have actuals every year about what actually the increase was. So the city's going to need to be involved as well.
You could also develop an application fee and things like that to cover expenses for staff time.
So if really, is our TIF plan 20 or 25 years? I can't remember. 20. So we're 4 or 5 years into a 20-year plan now. So the further we get along in our TIF plan, we don't have authority beyond that. This becomes less of an incentive. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. How would we like to proceed on this for now? Any thoughts or opinions?
Tyler, you said you had a couple maybe examples, and I'm curious, when they target, maybe we are looking for those buildings that need a lot of work maybe, and it kind of depends on what we think is a good fit for the program, or do we just, because we have examples like you talk about the application process for the OPRA, and we have some things we could help kind of guide a program for this.
Yeah, but I think probably use a lot of what the Brownfield Authority already has, would be my thought. There was also like a scoring mechanism that the DDA board, when I was the director here, had developed that was extremely comprehensive. We had Barry was on that committee, F. Toxiatis, and a couple other people. Very detailed-oriented people that put it together, so we could always pull that out to help as well. So I think we have a lot of things that could help us get started, and obviously these communities that are listed there, we'd probably be able to get some guidance from them as well. My suggestion or recommendation would be to approve or create like an ad hoc committee or something to have people that can help me work on this, and then come back to the board with a proposed program to create.
Okay. Well, I'd be willing to appoint that committee if there's anybody interested in serving on it.
I have a quick question for Tyler. So we talked about, we have the streetscape plan pretty close to finalized, but there were some big ticket items, and we talked about the snow melt being one of them. And were you thinking, a lot of your presentation was about improving the buildings, but were you thinking some public infrastructure as well on this, or is it mainly?
You could add public infrastructure to that, I would imagine.
Was that your thought, though,
That
or-
was something I didn't even think about.
How does that work?
Because the tax is still being created from the project. It would be the same as a brownfield, so if
Okay.
you look at let's look at Edgewater and North Channel here. So that was a private development, right? It was a brownfield. Included in that brownfield was the repavement of Memorial Drive. So the increase in taxes from the private development there was able to capture taxes that paid for the road improvements. Which part of what I'm thinking about strategically implementing this when we're looking at the bond for improving the streetscape, you potentially have a brownfield at the entrance of River Street there. That project in brownfield should cover the public infrastructure within that brownfield boundary that's created, and capture state tax dollars that DDA is not able to capture. So you're able to capture the state dollars to help you pay for the local public improvements. So don't put your bond money in that brownfield. You put your bond money on the next block over that doesn't have a brownfield. And then if you utilize this program to incentivize some key properties that are brownfield eligible and things like that, you could try to coordinate multiple brownfields to help pay for the public improvements and be able to do a larger streetscape plan utilizing brownfields, various brownfields and using the bond dollars where there's not a brownfield available. Cities like Kalamazoo do that type of planning on a consistent basis.
I think you're going to have to draw me a pretty picture on how that one works. I believe you.
I can draw you a picture. I'll put some fancy
Okay.
Pictures in there too.
More clip art.
Clip art. Is anybody interested in being on this ad hoc committee?
I'd be
You're already on it.
I know, but
Tyler and Bill? Bruce? Great. That's enough, I think? Excellent.
great.
Thank you. Will you head it up?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Then moving on to public comment?
I just have a wondering. So I've had a lot of community members reach out, and they all talked very positively about the lights and the trees in the parks down here. I know it came up at a DDA meeting, and it's come up at a city council meeting. The lights in the butterfly portion and the lights like in the area right after that butterfly park, people refer to it as, they don't come on consistently. So I just wasn't sure, like, 'cause people are like calling me about it, I've mentioned it, it's like, I don't know if it's a DPW thing or if it's a contractor issue, and I know there was a warranty on that, so I just wanted to mention it, because sometimes you drive by and they're on, and sometimes you drive by and they're not on, but all the other lights are on, so.
Yeah, that's an easy one. There was a contractor that installed it, and we'll just have to look at who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
But thank you.
So.
I'd like to make a comment on that. I did reach out to the contractor, and they informed me that the lights are solar powered.
Oh, just in that portion?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, it's not on a timer. It's based on the daylight and the nighttime. So, I'd be happy to reach out to him again and just say, these are some of the concerns. What are some other alternatives that we can look at? But can't really control when the sun and the.
Well, we live in Michigan.
Right,
Yeah.
except, here's the problem. That's true on the marina side. That's not true with the butterfly park.
Okay.
The butterfly park is on a timer. So we have one part that's on a sensor and another part that's on a timer. They were done differently. And all the questions are being generated in that gap period because the sensor lights come on when it starts to get dark, but the ones in the butterfly park don't come on until about 8:20 every day, right?
How do you know
With
that?
them.
You're right there. You see
Happy to
it,
be
Bruce.
watching, and I get a lot of these questions.
Yeah.
So, it's creating the perception that they don't work. Well, they all do work after about 8:30.
Well, I think we could just adjust the timer. But will you do that on your way home?
Yeah, well, the problem is, because it's on a sensor, the time changes every day.
Well, you're going to have
So
to
it's
change it
gonna
every week.
So I have
It
to,
probably shines in his bedroom light, and that's why you changed the timer on it.
but they were
March 9, we
installed.
get an hour more of daylight, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll have to be adjusted then for sure.
yeah.
Why
So
are,
they were
why are they
installed
on
different.
separate, why is one solar and one is a timer?
I'd be happy to ask that question and, be happy to dive further into it. Thanks, Bruce. And Scott.
Anybody else? Please.
Hi, my name is, my name is John Beach. I had a business in Manistee from 1975 to 2019 at First and Poplar. And I was also in the first DDA board, and I helped to bring the TIF into the DDA area. And I was on the board for several years. Nowhere near as complicated as now. And you really created a lot of wonderful improvements for the city. I noticed that you have a vacancy on your board, which is open to an interested party, not open. But I talked to Lindsay Swiderski, she's an interested party, she's on open. If we switched her to interested, then there'd be an open slot, and I could apply for a board position on the DDA, which I'd like to do. I think, for me, it'd be a lot of fun, just from the beginning to the end, and I think I'd have a little different perspective. Plus being a business owner too. And we were that close to being included within the DDA, but I didn't say anything about it at the time.
John, do you still own that property?
No.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'm not sure how that process looks, but we can look into what that looks like. Thank you. Anyone else? Barry?
So, just a couple comments on the discussion around Tyler's presentation, and actually Bruce's comments as well. Specifically with regards to the idea of this being last resort gap financing. Where I personally see a need that is lacking is opportunities to incentivize smaller projects in downtown. In general, I have a rule in my head that unless the project's at least $1 million, it's not worth the time or effort to go through any of the other existing incentives because they're generally geared towards larger projects. The amount of paperwork, effort, and requirements on them make it prohibitive to apply it to a project that's $500,000 or $300,000. Something that's more locally managed potentially could be a tool to help those smaller property owners who want to do things to our downtown, but just are kind of excluded from the bigger project incentives that are out there. So as you're thinking about this, that would just be something I would encourage you to think about is, we naturally tend to look at our big vacancies and the big projects, and we do have the most tools for them. But there's others out there, there are a lot of small property owners in our downtown district that want to do things, but are just kind of excluded based on the nature of things. So.
Thanks, Barry.
And to add on to that, if you coupled it with a facade grant too, and you did that, now you have a real good local incentive that doesn't need to take 8 months to a year to 3 years to go through the MEBC or the state funds.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you for being here. I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion from Bill.
Second.
Bruce. Second from Bruce. Thanks, Deanna.
Here we go.
Bruce.
Ruth and,
Bill and Bruce.
who was first?
Bill.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a race.
Yes,